Does anyone have any questions from this morning? Yes, please. Not complicated, contaminated. All the karma is complicated. Yeah. There are different way of understanding karma, from different. Of course, there's positive karma, negative karma, neutral karma, individual karma, collective karma, contaminated karma, non-contaminated karma. And when we talk about contaminated karma, that means karma or actions that has been motivated by one of the afflictive emotions, but someone can create a karma, uncontaminated karma, without being motivated afflictive emotions, but with other. So that is contaminated, means contaminated by the delusions, and that contaminated karma is the, of course, within that karma, then we have touring karma, completion karma, and contaminated touring karma is the main cause of rebirth in samsara, Yeah. Yes, please. Yeah, you, Jenny. Yeah.
I've always wanted to ask this question. In Tibetan, we've got Marikpa, which is ignorance, and then Ripa, which is knowing. Then you've got Sherab and Geshe, which I thought Geshe was an intrinsic wisdom and Sherab was an acquired wisdom. Could you kind of just explain the difference? Ripa, Geshe, and Sherab?
Rigpa can be again also kind of used differently, in different traditions, I think the way they use in Dzogchen traditions, the Rigpa is very different than the Rigpa that we study in philosophy or that, even though we use same word Rigpa, I think it's a very different meaning. Okay, but in generally, Rigpa means a mind that knows the objects. Okay, Sherab is one of the mental factors. Sherab the number cheba that distinguish the objects, differentiate the cup from the flower from the cup. It's the wisdom that does that, so and the Geshe, most time it is of course everyone has generally the as I mentioned yesterday, the definition of the mind is searching Rigpa, meaning searching. Cell means luminous or clear, and Rigpa, knowing. Of course, also that has also that could have a different connotations because whether your mistaken mind, which is also associated about whether it's not the object or all of that. So again, I don't know whether the translation knowing is the right or not, but normally Rigpa means knowing, understanding. So that is one. So Yul Rigpa means knowing the object. Okay. And wisdom is the mental factor that distinguish different objects, differentiate or distinguish different objects. Geshe is exalted wisdom that you actualize through the practice, So everyone has Sherab, but not necessarily everyone has the Geshe. Everyone has Rigpa, everyone has the Sherab, the wisdom, but not necessarily everyone has the Geshe. So, yeah. Yes, please.
I am very new to this,
Mm-hmm.
as you probably find out from the question I'm going to ask. Can you tell me how you know that the Buddha has reached the level?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's too big a question.
I don't think any question is stupid. I think every question has its own meaning to some question that might be very profound for someone it might look stupid or silly, but someone it might be most profound, whether it's question, whether it's answer, whatever, so anyway, of course there are many kind of reasonings, why Buddha was enlightened, one, his unbiased, unconditional love, compassion for all sentient beings was not just in stories or just a logic, but at that time, people who were around, they notice, they feel that. It's not something that that everyone saw, felt. It didn't. Even though there are a lot of peoples who are trying to criticize him, who are trying to put him down, sometimes physically trying to harm him, all kind of things, but he never show any sign of any anger, resentment, and he cared them as equally as he cared others. That one story is Devadatta was his own cousins, and he was always jealous and envious of the Buddha even from before Buddha left the palace, even as in the palace, because Buddha was crown king and he was not, so therefore he has more attentions. The Devadatta was always jealous of him, And then after Buddha left the kingdom, become a monk and that. Devadatta also followed that path. But even in that path, Buddha made much more progress in his path. He has all the followers. Devadatta didn't have so much. He couldn't make as much. So again, his jealousy still continue, and that. And he tried to harm Buddha many times, for many different kind of things. And trying to, one time, with one king trying to poison him, another time sending a wild elephant to attack him, another time rolling the rocks, many different things that he did, But later when we got sick, it was the Buddha who took care of him, and that is just the one story. There are many stories like that, So his love, compassion, unconditional, unbiased. And in terms of his wisdom or his knowledge is something that he saw that no other can see, So from all this perspective, then there is a sign of someone who achieved a state where no afflictive emotions are rising. Okay. And there is a sign of that his incredible love, compassion is unconditional, unbiased, or impartial. Because for a lot of people, we can be extremely compassionate with certain being, and we can be extremely upset with certain people. But that wasn't the case for him. That was what they observed. And then his ability to see, so many things that others are unable to see. And that clearly shows his wisdom, unlimited kind of wisdom and the ability. And so there are even stories of, some trying to test him, burning different ashes from different trees, putting all mixed up and telling him, to point out which ashes are from which trees. Without any hesitation, without that, he was able to point out, this ash of that particular tree, this ash of that particular tree, So he has that kind of mental ability, and that is the ability of something like enlightened beings. This is just a small tips of that. And so from that, I think that is anyone who has overcome their afflictive emotions, their obscurations, and who have developed all their positive qualities, highest level of positive quality, that is what we call enlightened. So it seems he fit that definitions. So he's, I haven't seen him, I haven't met him. I just trust on the information that has been passed by people who are around them, or people who have the mental capacity to see that, But so that is, I think, what you believe, that he was enlightened. Any? Yes, please.
Is sadness negative? Because there's the 52 there's all those mental factors. But, is sadness a negativity?
I wouldn't say sadness is negative, one of those delusional negative emotions. I think sadness by itself could be more neutral. It depends on how you use the sadness. It could be sadness can kind of inspire someone to be more kind, more compassionate, better persons, or sadness can make someone very negative and very bitter and very harmful. So I don't think the negative, the sadness itself is not a delusional mind.
You can be sad if somebody you're attached to you lose. So it's that in that case, the sadness is from a delusion, which is attachment.
Yeah.
Someone that you love, which you might love, but also there's attachment there. So you might be more sad because there's attachment. If you didn't have attachment, you wouldn't be so sad.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then you can be sad because I don't know, for some other not so good reason,
Mm-hmm.
like you've lost your big mansion or all your money or something.
Yes, yes.
Which you can be sad about that, but that's not really. Yeah, so I just see, that's why I was wondering whether the cause of the sadness influences whether the sadness is more positive or negative.
Mm-hmm.
No, it's just.
Of course, like any state of mind, one can try to understand whether it's positive or negative from the point of view of result, from the point of view of the cause, from the point of view of the the nature of the nature of the mind itself. But as you mentioned, a sadness that comes through attachments, sadness that can come from compassion too, even to love compassions, but it's not same level of sadness that we feel out of the attachment, that where it can overwhelm someone, overpower someone. So from that point of view, definitely there's one way of understanding that from the cause point of view, but the sadness itself, like in terms of attachments, anger, and ignorance, and all other delusions, the mind itself is kind of distorted mind. The nature of the mind distorted because in terms of attachment, it projects more quality, positive quality into object than actually there is. In anger, the mind projects more negative quality into the object than actually there is. So both of mind are exaggerating, projecting more qualities. One more positive quality, one negative qualities, more into the objects. Of course, ignorance we talk about, that is totally distorted. So that point of view, then it is mistaken mind, negative minds, distorted mind, distorted. But when it comes to the feeling, we don't kind of, the feeling itself is not necessarily distorted itself. It's just a result of feeling of certain, because of something. Yeah. So, any questions? If not, then we will continue the discussion from this morning. So this morning we talk about ignorance being the root of all the delusions, and how ignorance misperceive or distort the reality. Okay, by seeing the objects to exist from its own self by itself. Okay, so to understand whether that mind is ignorant and distorted or not, we have to find out whether the object really exists that way or not. If the actually object exists the way the mind, that ignorance perceived, then it is not ignorant. It's not a mistaken mind. Do you get it? If the object exists the way it appears to your mind perceived that way, if that is how it exists, then it is not a mistaken mind. It is not an ignorance. But if things exist differently than the way that appear to your mind and the way your mind you perceive that, and that mind become mistaken and ignorance. So therefore, trying to understand how things really exist. Does things exist the way it appear to our mind and the way we perceive them, or does it exist differently? And so that is the way, and that is the way the concept of ultimate truth or emptiness comes. There are many different ways of understanding emptiness from many different reasons and logics that you find in many of the Indian philosophers, scholars, writings. There are many different reasons, logics of understanding from the Nagarjuna's different writings, from Chandrakiri's writings, Arya Devas, also all different Shantideva and all different great earlier masters or philosophers, great thinkers. And they were not just philosopher and thinker, but they were also great practitioner, who took those into practice, Some of the very well-known, reasoning of that, there is what we call the logic of negating self-existence. And so that Nagarjuna, analyzing whether the self exists by itself, from others, both or neither. That is one of the very well-known way of understanding through that kind of reasoning and logic, trying to understand the selflessness. There is another reason that you find in another Nagarjuna's writing, analyzing, whether how the nature of that phenomena or object exists, whether the nature of that phenomena exists inherent by itself, whether the result of that object exists inherently or not, whether the cause of that object exists inherently or not. So again, there is another reason that you see. And then, you see there are 7 analysis, 7 different way of analysis, like the chariot. And then again, there is Shantarakshita, one of the another great master. He come with a different another reason, analyzing, whether if things exist inherently, whether it exists in one with its objects or many or separate from the objects. And then, of course, there are also other reasons, logics, from looking from dependent arisings. And sometimes that is known as the king of the reasoning. Today I thought maybe I might just talk on from that point of view, okay? Because we cannot touch on all those different of that, and so, in relation to that, I'm going to, kind of just to give some idea where the source of those teachings come from. Sometimes it's helpful to us to know that it comes from authentic sources, not just kind of, so in the sutras, there is a verse where Buddha said, whatever is produced by depending on others' condition is not produced. So what it means, okay, maybe there is no nature of being produced in that. And whatever dependent on condition is taught as empty. And whoever understands emptiness has peacefulness. So in that sutra, Buddha says, whenever he taught, whenever it discussed, saying, any object being, like in sutra, we find, form is empty. Emptiness form. Empty is not other than the form is not empty. In same way, same feeling is empty. Discrimination is empty. Compositional factors is empty. Consciousness is empty. All phenomena are empty. So you find that kind of statement in so many different Buddha's teaching sutra. So here what he's saying, whenever he explains about empty or emptiness, he's saying what it means is that anything that is dependent on other conditions, other factors that has been explained or taught as empty. So therefore you shouldn't understand emptiness as being nothingness. Do you get it? In Buddhism, when we hear the term emptiness, a lot of time we might think emptiness means nothingness. It doesn't mean that. So what it means, empty means empty of independent. Okay? Empty of independent existence. Because everything is dependent arising. Everything is dependent on other conditions, other factors. Therefore, since everything is dependent on other conditions, other factors, therefore nothing can exist independently. Therefore, everything is empty. Empty of what? Empty of independent existence. We are not saying this cup is empty of water. Okay, there is water inside. When we talk about emptiness of cup, we are talking about emptiness of independent cup. Okay. When you talk about emptiness of self, what it means is emptiness of independent self. Why is empty of independent self? Because self is dependent arising. Because self is dependent on other many factors, conditions. Because the cup is dependent on many conditions. Same as the table, the chair, the flower, the computer, the house, everything inside here. So that is, we have to understand that, because everything is dependent arises, because everything exists by depending on other factors, other conditions, therefore it cannot exist independently, therefore it cannot exist by itself. If something exists by itself, it means it will be able to exist without depending on other factors, other conditions. If something depends on other factors, other conditions, or the existence of that, then that means it cannot exist by itself. Because it is dependent on other factors. When something is dependent on other factors, how can it exist by itself? If something exists by itself, then it should be able to exist without depending on other factors and conditions. But to our mind, whenever any object appear to our mind, it appear to exist by itself. And not only it appear to exist by itself, then our mind follow that appearance and then perceive to exist by itself. And that is the way misleading comes. Therefore, that is why that mind that perceived to be existing by itself is ignorance, because the object does not exist the way it appeared to that and the way the mind perceived that way. Because the way it appeared to that mind and the way mind perceived is that object to exist by itself. But in reality, when we analyze deeply, then we find they do not exist by itself independently. Okay. So similarly, Nagarjuna's in his precious garland, he says, whatever is dependent arising, that is taught as emptiness by the Buddha. Buddha himself already explained there that whenever he explained it as emptiness, whatever is depending on other conditions, that I've explained it as emptiness. So you should understand emptiness from that perspective whenever I say emptiness. So that is similarly here, Nagarjuna making same point. Whatever is dependent arising is taught as emptiness. Taught by whom? Buddha. And that is imputed by dependent. And this is the middle way. And he continued, there is no phenomena whatever which is not dependent origin. Therefore, there is no phenomena whatever which is not emptiness. So again, emptiness equal dependent arising equal emptiness. The meaning of emptiness is dependent arising. The meaning of dependent arising is emptiness. So we should understand in that way. When we think of emptiness, we don't think of nothingness, but we think of empty of independent existence. Therefore, we think of dependent arising. When we think of dependent arising, since object is dependent arising, therefore it cannot be independent arising or independent existing. Therefore, it's empty of independent existence. Therefore, it's emptiness. It's empty because it's dependent arising. It's dependent arising because it is empty. Are we clear? Keep adding.
Existence each time, because then it gets a bit, just go back to just empty and you think, oh, it's like that should be returning, not just empty, but empty of independent existence.
Yes, of course, if you kind of make it long, then empty of independent arising or inherent, like in Hasuda at the very beginning, it starts with, how we should hold and behold all the five aggregates as empty of inherent nature. It is already explained there. Five aggregates are empty of inherent nature or independent nature. Then instead of saying, form is empty of inherent nature, feeling is empty of, then he just go, form is empty, feelings, but you have to bring the earlier one. Empty of what? Empty of inherent nature, empty of independent nature. Yeah. Similarly, in Arya Devas, his 400th stanza of verses, he says, whatever is arising due to the dependency that cannot exist by its own nature. It cannot exist by its own nature because it's dependent on other factors and conditions. If something can exist by its own nature, then it doesn't depend on others. So therefore, all these are non-existent by its own nature. Therefore, there is no self. Therefore, there is no self that exists by its own side, by its own power, by its own nature. Same way, there is no your body, your mind, your feeling, your thoughts, that exists by its own power, but that can exist by its own nature, because they all are dependent arising. Not only your self, your mind, your body, but everything that you see, everything you hear, everything you smell, everything you taste, everything you touch, object of all of that, and every things that comes in your mind, they all are empty of existence by their own nature, by itself, from its own side, because all of them can only exist by depending on so many other factors and so many other conditions. Yes, please.
What about what we refer to as mind stream?
Even the mind stream is same. Even the mind stream is also empty of existence by its own nature, because it also depends on many other factors. My present moment of my mind is dependent on my previous mind. My previous mind is dependent on the mind that is this morning mind, because it's just continuity of that. Without my previous mind, I wouldn't have this mind. Without this morning mind, I wouldn't have this mind. Without yesterday mind, I wouldn't have this mind. So it is still continuity of previous mind. It's dependent on the previous moments. And many other factors. That is just one factors. That's just one cause. When we talk about mind, as I mentioned, the nature of minds is, it is shapeless. It has no shape. It has no color. It has no size. Unlike physical matter, unlike physical matter, unlike physical energy, there's no to the mind. There's no size, big, small, different shapes. There's no different colors. So that the nature of mind is free of all of that, empty of all of that, but that has the functioning or the characteristic or the ability or nature of, perceiving the objects, whether it perceived correctly or incorrectly is different thing, but perceiving the objects and the nature of luminous, or clear, able to function, able to reflect the object into the mind. And that has continuity, that is, and so again, that mind, in order to that mind to exist as a mind, to be able to function as a mind and exist as a mind, it depends on many factors. The clarity factor, the awareness or knowing factors, the momentary factors, so it all depends on those parts. If you take all these parts, then there can be no mind that can function as a mind. The mind cannot exist and function as a mind. If you take the clarity part of that mind, then it's no more mind. It cannot function as mind. If you take the nature or characteristic of ability to perceive the objects, if you take that away, then it's no more mind. It's no more function. Cannot function anymore. So there are many. It's just like, there are many parts of this cup that make cup. Okay, and it depends on all these part of every part to become a cup and function as a cup. If I take this bottom part and some other parts, then it cannot be cup, cannot function as a cup. But when you put everything together, many so many different factors part together, and then it has certain functioning to able to hold water or whatever drink that and use for that, and then it is able to function and exist as a cup. Similarly, that's the same with the mind, whether it's a positive mind, whether it's a negative mind, whether it's a neutral mind, it has many parts, many characteristics, many nature of that, and it depends on all of them. Once you take that, then it can function and exist as that object. And similarly, Lama Tsongkhapa mentioned in his, writing, praise to dependent arisings. Whatever depends on conditions that is devoid of intrinsic existence, what an excellent instructions can there be more amazing than his proclamations. So he's saying, the Buddha's explanations of emptiness, how everything's emptiness because they all are dependent on other conditions. It's something no one had explained before. Something that no one has discovered before or explained before the Buddhas. Even before Buddhas, so many great thinkers, philosophers, spiritual leaders have existed, so many of them, so much great meditator, wise, all of them. But no one explained this. No one has explained how everything is empty. Not only empty, it is empty because they are empty because they are dependent arising, because they are dependent on other conditions. So that is why Lama Tsongkhapa said he's so amazed by that. Therefore, since no phenomena exists other than origination through dependence, no phenomena can exist other than being devoid of intrinsic existence, you taught. So saying to the Buddha. So basically, saying anything that is dependent arising is empty. Anything that is empty is dependent arising. Therefore, there's nothing, no objects, no phenomena, external, internal, no object, no phenomenon, that is not dependent arising. Since everything is dependent arising, therefore everything is empty of independent existence. And since everything is empty of independent existence, therefore everything is, we have to look as it is empty of independent existence. So that is we can try to understand dependent arising from many different levels. On a gross level, we can try to understand dependent arising, the condition phenomena, depending on its causes and conditions. Okay. Our body is dependent on its cause and conditions. Our body is made of our parents' sperm and eggs, and that have been nurtured and developed by many other food elements. Over the year, we nurture it, develop and grow it by depending on so many other factors, conditions. Good air, good waters, the heating energies, and then many different food, drinks that we experience. Not only that, all our feelings, all our emotions, all our minds also are dependent arisings. You know, all different thoughts, all different feelings, all different, they all are dependent arising by depending on many cause and conditions, external, internal cause and conditions. Yes, yes.
Those causes and conditions, sorry, are they relative true?
Yes. Yes. So that is one way of, even in modern science, I think only in recently the science, modern science has been discussing, talking about dependent arisings, how everything's dependent arisings. As with new development, new technology, and they are able to understand, when you cut all the forests in Amazon, how it affects the climate in the rest of the world, how it is affecting that. How the melting of all the ice, in the mountains, Himalayas, or in the Arctics and all, is affecting the climate in the rest of the world, very far away, the opposite side of the, how there is some disruptions in the nature, plants, animals, how it affects the whole systems. How depending on different cells and different how it change and affect and our body, our well-being. So there's more now is something that they discover, and there's something they discuss and talk about, and how to change by changing the cause and conditions. But it is something that Buddha already talked about more than 200,000 years ago. He talked about ayus, and everything's interdependent, interconnected, interrelated. Yes, please.
Geshe, within independent arising, there's the mere imputation of object. Is that part of independent arising?
Yes, I'm coming to that.
Oh,
Yeah. No, good. No, good. So that is where I'm saying that we can have understanding of dependent arising on many different levels. Depending arising from the level of depending on each cause and condition. That is one level. I think that dependent arising is not so difficult to understand. We observe the plant, you plant the seed, you put the water, fertilizers, right amount of heat, light, and with the time it grows, that it depends on its cause and conditions. Our health, we know it depends on cause and condition. That is why we try to change our, diet, the way of living, by doing more exercise, whatever, right diet, right food, right way of living, meditation, yoga, whatever different, because we understand those effects, our well-being, our health. We understand cause and effect. That is depending on those cause. And by changing the cause, it can change the result. And that is how all the progress we made in the health area is that knowing when we have some illness, something, where does that come from? Why did that happen? What is the cause of that? That is all the research are about that, trying to find. Once they find out this cause, this lead to that, so then they start to change, can we change this one, the cause? Can we do something that cause so that it doesn't produce that result or change the result? And that is where that we make progress in health. And every department is by understanding the cause and effect. So, and sometimes I say, not only we, I think even the animal seems to have some understanding of cause and effect on that level. They know what to avoid because they know if they eat that, they will become sick. It will make them miserable. Even though they might not be able to use the term cause and effect, but in meaning, they understand that when they are sick, they know what to eat to cure themselves. Certain plants, certain things they recognize, they can see it, and they started to kind of cure themselves in different ways because they can understand, that cause and that effect to a certain level. Next level of understanding of dependent arising is, not only depend on cause and condition, but depend on its parts. Everything is made out of parts. Again, whether it's a physical matter or non-physical matter, non-physical energy or mind, they all are made of different parts that make that, this cup is made out of so many parts, upper part, lower part, side part. This computer, iPad is made out of so many parts, all different chips, all different, the body outside, the screens, the chips, all the wire, all different electricity things is made out of that. The table that I'm seeing is made out of so many parts, the legs, the top, and many other parts that make it a table. Same with the chair, it's made out of so many different parts. And if you take each of those parts away, if I take all this part of this table away, it cannot function as table, it cannot exist as a table. Are we clear? If I take this chair into all the parts that make this table, then it cannot be chair anymore. It cannot function as a chair anymore. Same with the cup, same with everything that we see, smell, hear, all the objects, all phenomena. So everything depends on its part because there's nothing that exists partless. There's no objects, there's no phenomena that is partless. That has been object of some discussions, debate in the past, maybe continue to be now, maybe in some cases. There are certain school of thoughts, non-Buddhist, as some Buddhist school of thought who believe there is a partless, objects, partless mind, partless physical matter. But Nagarjuna and the Mahayana school of thought refute that ideas, and with the reasoning and logic, they have refuted that idea, and then they established that everything is partless. They don't say it is partless. It's like there can be a physical matter is so small that you cannot break into any more smaller part. Okay. Do you get it? I don't know what will be the most smallest particles that the science has now. Probably they have been able to go smaller and finding more smaller with the time. And probably there is more to discover where they feel that they cannot go more smaller than that. But probably they will be, with the technology and more improvement, probably they will go more and more. That I think they have already went through a certain process over the centuries. But even when it comes to so small that you cannot break into any more two pieces, still it is a part. It's not part. It is part. It has a part because then there is a part, south part, north part, west and east part, up and down part. If that object does not have that part, where there's east, west, that part, and where these two part doesn't, like where you can come together like that, if it is partless, then this one can go this and this, then it cannot be bigger and bigger when all these particles come together. Do you get it? Two partless particle coming together, four partless coming together, or the smallest that particle, and then slowly becoming bigger and bigger. Their argument is, if there is partless where there's no side part, then when they come together, then they should, like putting someone inside, everything go inside in same places. There's nothing to obstruct them. Therefore, it cannot create bigger objects by coming together like that, because one side come here, one side, and then it become bigger, Therefore, it is part. It is not partless. It is a part because there is a side part. That is their kind of argument. And not only their argument, I think when you really think, it makes sense. At least to me. But I could be totally, correct too. But at this point, so therefore there's nothing that is partless. So everything has part, and therefore everything exists on. Everything can only exist and function by depending on its parts. So that is one understanding of dependent arising. It's a different, little bit higher level of understanding dependent arising. The early one dependent arising on cause and effect. Depending on cause and conditions. And this one, not only it depends on cause and condition, it also depends on its parts for that object to exist and function as that object.
And so,
Yes.
so the realizing is depends on the experience of that combined with compassion and chitta, etc.
Mm-hmm. To experience the emptiness and have the understanding or realization the emptiness, it doesn't require that you need to develop true love, compassions. But definitely love, compassion, cultivating love, compassion, bodhicitta will make more easy to have that realization, that wisdom. But it is not like a absolute requirement. But of course, to achieve fully enlightenment or full potential is equally important, to have the wisdom as well as the love, compassion, bodhicitta mind. Yeah. So the wisdom relies on the emptiness. Here, I don't know in English the terms, how they are, how different they are. But in Tibetans, understanding is, Rigpa or Tokpa. And when we talk of realization, then we are talking about Nyam Tok, and that is experiential understanding, not just an intellectual understanding. So when we talk about realization, then we are talking about that, not just a theoretical or analytical understanding of that subject, but actually experiencing and having the spiritual experience. So that is what we call realizations. Okay. So definitely that realization experience. So then next level of dependent arisings is everything depend on other factors kind of mutual dependent arisings. There is a concept and there is the functioning of coming, because there is a term concept and a functioning of coming because there is going. There is going because there is coming. If there is no concept and functioning of coming, then there wouldn't be a concept of going, functioning, going, and so coming is dependent on going, going is dependent on coming. Others depending on this side, therefore we say that side. This side depending on others. If there's no other, we cannot say this side. If there's no this, we cannot say that side. If there's no left, we cannot say there's a right. If there's no right, there cannot be left. If there's no up, there cannot be down. If there's no down, there cannot be up. If there's no positive, we cannot talk about negative. If there's no negative, we cannot talk about positive. So all objects are, all these are dependent on each other. The existence of one depends on others, mutually dependent arising. It's a different from dependent arising cause and parts. And it's more difficult to understand it dependent arisings. Because when we see the object, it seems like, there's coming by itself, going by itself, right by itself, left by itself, up by itself, down by itself, good by itself, bad by itself. Interesting. Just to take one example, coming, going, then we can maybe go with others. Is the act of coming by itself? Is the act of coming, going by itself? Let's give an example. The act of moving your steps, okay? Taking the steps with your feet, leg. That act of moving and taking the steps, is that coming or going? It's neither coming, it's neither going by itself. It's coming from your side. It's going from my side or this side. But the act itself neither coming and going. So therefore, there is no act of coming and going by itself. Absolute coming and going, all dependent arising, all relative. Same death and birth. That is why you find in a lot of Buddha's teaching in the terms or statements, in emptiness there's no coming, no going. Because if you really analyze, there's no act of coming and going, absolute coming and going. There's no coming and going by itself. Same with birth and death. What is birth and death? Is there birth and death by itself? Let's say when my consciousness leaves my body, is that death death or birth. The moment my consciousness separate from my body, leave my body, normally we think it's dead. But it's not dead by itself or absolute death. From human point of view, from my point of view, human point of view is dead. But from the point of view of Partho, the intermediate state is the birth. Very moment my consciousness leave the body, there's a Partho simultaneously. From the Partho point of view, is a birth. From my point of view, is death. But neither is death or birth by itself. Is death only from point of my point of view, is birth only from the point of view of that being. We can see that day and night, sunset, sunrise. There's no sunset by itself. There's no sunrise by itself. There's no day by itself. There's no night by itself. From certain continent, certain country is a night. From certain country, certain point of continent, certain country is a day. From one other side is sun rising. From another side is sun setting. So is neither sun setting by itself, is neither sun arising by itself, neither is day by itself, neither is night by itself. It's all relative from where you look. Interesting. The problem is, the problem is, now when we talk and discuss about that, it makes sense. But everyday life, there's sun setting by itself. In our mind, it doesn't come, or it is just relative, I'm seeing sunset. You feel like that is what really reality is. Sunset is a night. We have this strong grasping, absolute night, absolute day, absolute sun rising, absolute sun setting, absolute going, absolute coming, absolute birth, absolute death. And because of that, then we become very narrow-minded. Our mind becomes very narrow-minded. This is the only way, because this is the absolute. Because that is how thing exists by itself. That is how thing really exists by itself. That's what it really is. So our mind started to become grasping and very fixed, narrow. But when we understand all these are just relative, there's no coming, going, day, night, everything is just, there's nothing absolute. It's all relative. It all depends on other factors, from where you are, from which time, where you are, which part of, from which side you look. So when we take in all these considerations, how it could be day, it could be night, it could be coming, it could be going, it could be sun setting, it could be sun rising, it could be death, it could be rebirth, then your mind becomes much more open, flexible, not so fixed, not so tight. Your mind becomes much more spacious. You see there's all the possibility. That is when we have realization and emptiness that make our mind so spacious instead of fixed and narrow, like at the moment. That is why we all have arguments and fight, because I believe that is the absolute truth. You believe that is the absolute truth. another person with another absolute truth. We all are kind of, holding on different absolute truth. Yes, please. Yeah.
I just question about when we make, like, if a person can make their mind so stateless and move beyond absolutes, and then that and then do they go beyond karma? Like, does that, like, what's the relationship with, like, how that being will experience no karma? Like, is it beyond that? I don't know if that's the right way of phrasing the question.
No, there is, when you have realization in emptiness, and then your actions, you started to create actions, not necessarily being motivated by the ignorance all the time. So you started to create less negative karma or less contaminated karma, and as, again, you meditate, contemplate, and as your experience or realization or emptiness get better, and when you have direct realizations of that over the time, when you have direct experience, direct realization of the emptiness, then you don't create any new throwing karma. And then from that, you stop creating any throwing karma to be reborn in the samsara, while, we are trying to deal with the previous karma, purifying them, clearing them, overcoming them, but you will stop creating new throwing karma to be born in samsara. So that is the relation between the karma. Once you have direct realization, then you stop creating new throwing karma. Throwing karma is that throw us in the samsara rebirth. Okay, so I think we will have a break. Yeah. So I guess it's like 2:50. So maybe we 3. Yeah, maybe 3:10. So if that will give still. You can bring later. Okay. Okay. I heard Is she aware that she's having a dementia?
But it's not
Because of concentration or other. Yeah, maybe. Yes, yes.
just get a photo from behind. I won't wait till they all sit down.
Yeah.
I want to get a photo this way because I've been trying to take from the seat, but I don't know if it's very.
There's a couple of seats in the front too, if someone wants to move forward. Steph? Steffi, if you want to come forward, there's 2 empty seats in the front now, if you
Yeah.
would like to.
Julia.
And anyone else too.
So you got promoted. Promotions. No, it's a promotion, but more responsibility. Now you can't sleep. So promotion come with the responsibility. So so when you want to ask the questions,
I just wanted to ask you about if space is inherently easy.
again, as I mentioned before, space is also not inherently existing. Nothing exists inherently. From the Nagarjuna point of view, from the Mayan Madhyamika point of view, middle way school, there is even one statement in his Nagarjuna Precious Garden. So he mentions, not only the form is merely label, even the space is merely label. Then there is 2 other verses later that I forgot, but so in that, first he go on form aggregates, that how form aggregate is empty of inherent nature. The form does not exist inherently, but not only form, even the space is empty of inherent nature. Okay, so coming to that questions, and how space is also merely labeled. So we are talking about that there's no partless, about even the most smallest particles. Same with the space. When you talk of space, the space of the south, space of the north, northern space, southern space, eastern space, western space, and if you take away each of those side space, there's no space. So when you talk space, it's also dependent on that. And if you take those different portions of that southern state away, northern space, and up space, all of that, then there's no space. So the space is depending on all these parts. And so from that point of view, again, it's depending on this part. So that therefore it can't be inherently existent or independent existence. And more than that, maybe I will go a little bit later, on merely level. So, yes, please.
If you took all those spaces away, what would be left?
What will be left?
Yeah.
And there will be nothing. So therefore, there is no inherently existing space. Yeah. Even after taking away, still there is a space to point on. Then that will be inherently existing space. When you take all the parts away, and still there is something. Then, but when you take all the parts away, you cannot pinpoint and say this is that objects. you know. And so therefore, that is why it cannot exist independently, why it cannot exist inherently or by itself. Only by coming together of all this, then you can say there is the space, by depending on all that. So we are talking about when you have understanding of emptiness, how your mind becomes spacious, open, flexible, not so rigid, fixed, narrow, and a lot of time, you know, we get in conflict because of such a rigid and fixed mind, you know. I say it's going, and you say no, it's coming, you know. I say it's a left, and you others say no, it's a right, and we fight over this. You are wrong, you are mistaken, you are ignorance, you know nothing. The other person thinks I'm ignorance, you know, I know nothing, I'm confused, you know. And that is where the problem arises, where the conflict arises, because our mind gets so fixed. But when we have understanding of emptiness, how everything is, there's nothing that exists absolutely, everything's dependent arising, everything's relative. It depends on from which point of view you look at, from which side you look at it, from what perspective you look at it. There's so many different factors. And when you understand that, then you know, you could be right, I could be right. We don't have to be so rigid. You know, your mind become more flexible. Of course, you follow what you feel right, but at the same time, your mind is more open. You could be right too. You know, instead of saying you are absolutely wrong or absolutely ignorant, you know. Instead, our mind become much more openness, you know, and that helps. We don't have to be so take it so personal and hurt because someone said your view is what you think is wrong and what they believe is right. You know, they could be right from their point of view. I could be right from my point of view. So therefore, I don't have to put them down because they are right from their point of view. They look the situation, things differently from different point of view. From that point of view, it might be different. So even you don't agree fully, but your mind is much more open, flexible. You don't have to be so strongly rigid about things. You know? And so that is where how understanding of emptiness by understanding how everything is a relative, dependent arising. Nothing is absolute. Nothing exists by itself as it is, absolutely. That understanding put your mind much more ease, much more spacious, much more open, much more flexible. And when your mind is that, then you know, you don't get so easily hurt and upset and all of that. So coming back to dependent arisings, you know, also there is a concept of how everything exists by depending on the mind, the thought, how everything is merely imputed, labeled or designated by the mind. Nothing can exist independently by itself without depending on the mind, that label, that designate, that impute. Therefore, everything depends on that mind, labeling, depend on merely label. And again, from that perspective, then again, dependent arising. And that is more subtle understanding of dependent arising. When you have understanding of how everything is merely labeled, merely imputed, then you have better understanding, or there's no grasping of that object existing from its own side objectively. There is some basis to impute on, but the table, there is a basis to impute as a table. There is the legs, there is the upper part, and many other part of it. And when you put in certain way, it has certain function to be able to function as a table, whatever that is. On the basis that whoever invented at the very beginning, there comes a what should we call? The label is the table. From that, it becomes table. Before that, there was some object, but it is not table. Before that, someone said, "Can you bring me a table?" You wouldn't know what to bring. If you see, you wouldn't say, "Oh, it's a table." You think there is something, but it's not table. After that, imputed, we give a label as a table. Then from there, then we have this in our understanding of table. Then when you see it, you see it is a table. You interact as a table. You relate as a table. If someone said, "Bring a table," you know what to do. If someone said the table has broken, you know what they are talking about. So we can communicate, we can interact, And I'm giving an example of table, but that is same with everything. All objects. Same with the space. Without that label, we wouldn't be talking. If someone says, is the space inherently existing or not? I wouldn't know what they are talking about. Do you get it? I wouldn't know what they are talking about. I wouldn't be able to understand what they are talking about. I wouldn't be able to say this is non-inherently existing or inherently existing or that, all of that. There is basis to impute as a space. There is something that is devoid of something, abstractions and on that energy or whatever that object, then we label space, and that is what space is, and that's how we relate. And so that is more kind of more subtle understanding dependent arising. And when we have that understanding dependent arising, then we will have really understanding of emptiness. Very close. So in relation to that, maybe again, as I mentioned before, it can be helpful, beneficial. You will have some authentic sources, in Prasanaparamita Sutra, Buddha says, thus it is so called, form is merely name. The form, after going to the form is not inherently existing, form is empty of inherent existence, and then at the end, he make a conclusions. Since it's not merely exist, since the form is not inherently existing or independent existing, therefore, thus it is the so-called form is merely name, merely label. In another sutta, in Prasana Sutta, he also says all the phenomena are known to be merely name. All phenomena. So here, first he talks about the form. Now, not only form, all the feeling, discrimination, compositional factors, consciousness, all the other physical matters, non-physical matters, samsara, nirvana, everything is merely name, merely imputed, merely labeled. Cup is merely labeled as a cup. I'm merely labeled. There's my body, my mind, my emotion, you know, my feelings, the basis, on the basis of all this coming together, then there's, you know, level to within Sherab, to within Sherab, you know, level to within Sherab. And therefore, when I see I'm to within Sherab. When you see Sherab, anyone say, did you see Geshe? You should say, oh, he was there, he was not here. We are able to relate. Everyone's able to relate. So, yeah. So here, now I see here, Nagarjuna in Precious Garlic. Form is merely named condition phenomena. Form is merely named condition. Also, space is merely named. There is no elements. So how can there be form? Therefore, there's also no merely name. Even the merely name is empty of inherent existence. Even the emptiness is empty of inherent existence. Even the emptiness is empty of independent existence. Even the emptiness is merely level. Even the merely level is merely level. And therefore, you know, the moment, and therefore there is nothing that exists absolutely where you can hold on, cling on, you know. I think it's such a profound. In many other spiritual paths, even though they're, you know, or school of thought, you know, you say, you know, is samsara, is suffering, you should let go, you should give up, no attachments, all of that. But still there's absolute God, absolute something where you cling on, grasp on, you know. Still there's object of clinging, grasping, because that is absolute. Here, even the solutions, you know, the emptiness itself, the solution to all the problem, even that is merely level. Therefore, you shouldn't cling and grasp on even that solutions. So then it totally dissolves any grasping, any clinging, because there's no object of any object to hold on and cling on. Because there's nothing, even the Buddha itself, even the goal that we're trying to achieve, Buddhahood, even the path that lead to that Buddhahood, the wisdom itself, the object of that wisdom, emptiness itself, the solution itself, also all of them are empty of absolute existence, empty of inherent existence. And therefore, you have to learn to not to cling and grasp on anything, no matter how great, good they might be. Even the highest level, the most perfect and complete state of being or mind or path, still we shouldn't be clinging and grasping. And we are able to let go of clinging and grasping the moment we see them not absolute, but merely level. And so that is very, I think it's a very profound. In Dharmakirti, you know, another great Indian masters, in his commentary on value cognitions, he said, you know, with the aid of sound, terms are imputed. Okay.
Can you say that again? Sorry.
With the aid, with the help of the sound, okay, the word, sound, word, you know, terms are imputed. You know, we give terms, label to different things, isn't it? We use different terms, different label to different objects, different things. You know, this is for a conventional understanding. The purpose of word is there. Is that clear to you? That is what he says, you know. So there's no absolute table, curve, me, you, everything's. All these are terms that we use for conventional understanding so that we can communicate, so we can interact, so we don't have misunderstanding, so we know what you are saying. For that purpose, that is only for that purpose. Not because they exist absolutely by themselves. There's no absolute cup itself, there's no absolute table itself. You know. Yes, please.
Usually, so as Geshe was explaining the spaciousness of being able to understand that there is no inherent meaning to a form or space or whatever, but in fact the mind can become more spacious if we don't hang on to being right, having an argument, for example, which I can see as a Buddhist is so helpful to me. Therefore, it means I can manage my emotions, right? But they don't exist as such. What about something like the invasion of Ukraine, right? So you don't want to have an argument with that other person because there is no inherent existence of the war, of the invasion, of Putin justifying it by saying Ukrainians are Nazis. In that case, what do we do as Buddhists? Because we don't want to have millions killed. What's a good way to come upon it from the point of view of wisdom of emptiness? Yes.
From the wisdom of emptiness, we don't try to cling the idea I'm right, others are wrong, necessarily, solidly, that I'm absolutely right. The information I have absolutely true. The others are absolutely wrong. They are misinformed. They are totally wrong, ignorance, whatever those kind of thought we might have. Not to have any kind of those feelings. Instead, feel compassion because they are suffering. The people, Ukraine are suffering, the Russians are suffering. The armies they have been sent, they have been forced to send, many of them, most of them. They are suffering, they are losing their life. Their family are suffering. Including Putin must be going crazy in his mind. Everything going wrong. Everything going out of control that he thought he might have control. The result, he must be having a sleepless night. It's just his ego that is kind of, and other things that make him that. But so he must be also going so much suffering, pain. So understanding that everyone's suffering, those who are involved directly and especially them, and then also the rest of the world are suffering in different ways, emotionally, in many other ways, So through that, we try to feel compassion for everyone. Try to feel compassion every time. We try to help in whatever way we can, directly, indirectly. Even we cannot be helped directly, keeping in our prayer, our meditations, sending the prayers. In that way, we can indirectly, and in other ways, we can support and help to stop the killing, to stop the sufferings. We have to do that, but without clinging, grasping, and without, instead, with a sense of love, compassion for everyone's, because we don't want to see any suffering, so therefore we want to end the suffering, and whatever there is a way that we can contribute and help to end the suffering or reduce the suffering, we try to do that. So yeah.
So without trying to reinforce how terrible it is, what an awful thing that's happening, which makes people even more.
Yeah,
you can see.
yeah, I think in everything is like that, you know, whether we talk about the war, whether we talk about the vaccine, whether we talk about the mask, effective or mask or not mask, whether we talk about political different views in every country's different political views. We everyone has certain views, you know, whether it's effective or not effective, whether it's helpful or not helpful. And we all hold so absolutely so strongly to each those ideas, and then we become very, you know, what do you call, then we try to look others very bad, you know, to look down them, you know, they are ignorant and they are not caring, they are unloving people, all kind of things. We have different, all kind of different perceptions, different feelings, and that comes in our conversations, that come in our actions. The other person feel that energies, and they also become and more defendants in their views, and then it is a clashes, and then everything's become worse and worse, more divided. You know, so
Thank you, Geshe.
yeah, I think we all can have different views. There's nothing wrong with that, as long as we don't be so concrete and so fixed, and try to look at other views and those who have other views negatively, and put them down. Sometimes we might not say the word, but in our mind, we are putting them down, those ignorant people, those uncaring people, you know, like that kind of attitude, you know. And so, yeah. Yes, please, John.
Just, I was just wondering, when looking at the absence of inherent existence in all phenomena, everything, including self, is there a way to go through? Would you start with the absence of inherent existence of self, rather than try, at first, and then the absence of inherent existence in other phenomena, or the other way around?
Yeah, I think generally that the training in those meditations, starting with the selflessness of self, or emptiness of the self. Okay, because it all started with strong self-grasping. You know, that strong self-grasping, because of grasping there is inherently existing self, there is strong self-grasping. On the basis of strong self-grasping, then it is, you know, my body, my mind, that's something that belongs to, possess to that self. And then my friend and my things, this, and then that is how we expand that, starting with a strong self, you know.
Yeah, I think, from my own experience, it's how I see it. It's easier, like it's, this is a plate. It's hard to start off thinking that's really not an inherently existing plate. That seems, it's much easier when you look inside and see that there is no, you're changing all the time, that there's no inherently existence of that self that you've propped up and made up. I think it's, for my own self, that seems to be a much easier way of working through this concept.
Yeah, generally the advice when you try to meditate on emptiness, selflessness, is starting with the selflessness of the persons, you know, and then you expand to your body and your mind, the basis of the self, that which we impute as the self, your own aggregates, you know, your physical aggregate and your mental aggregates. Within the mental aggregate, then, you know, those 5 aggregates like feeling, discriminating mind, compulsion, attack, and conscience. So you always start with self and expanding to your body and your mind, and then you expand to others slowly, and then to all, embracing all phenomena. And then first you start with that, and then you expand it to all the conditioned phenomena, and then you expand to non-conditioned, impermanent, permanent phenomena, and all other phenomena. So yeah, in meditation, that is how progressively, when you try to meditate, then that is how starting point is the sadness of the persons. Yeah. So I was reading the Dharmakirti's commentaries, and then I just read one verses, and then next he said, the skillful accepts, so those wise and skillful, those wise and skillful who have wisdom, accept worldly conventions. We don't negate the worldly conventions of this is cup. Do you get it? Sometimes when you don't understand them, then when you talk about emptiness, then we reject everything, and then worldly convictions, that there is no cup, there's no table, then like that. The wise one who really understand emptiness correctly, they don't reject the relative reality, conventional reality. While they understand the ultimate reality, also they accept conventional reality. They don't reject that. That's where it is,
Which text of Dharmakirti are you reading from?
His commentary on valid cognitions. Yeah. And because independent on them, the worldly conventions, they can lead people to their object of attainment, their ultimate goal. Then because of that, then we can talk about what is the path, what is not the path, how to actualize the path, how to meditate, how to actualize the path. And through that, then we can meditate, we can contemplate, and we're able to actualize the path. And through that, we can achieve the goal, the enlightenment. If we don't have this relative world, then we cannot communicate. We cannot communicate, we cannot explain what is the path, what's the right path, what's the wrong path, how to practice the path. All these are part of relative reality. All this part of ultimate reality. I mean, not ultimate, relative and conventional reality, conventional world. So that is. So then, once we have that understanding, then when we understand, nothing exists inherently, independently. Everything exists on dependent arisings. Everything exists on merely level, Therefore, all the appearance of the objects as an inherent existence is totally mistaken. Then you understand all this appearance now. When you open your eyes, everything you see, it appears inherently existing from objective by itself. Every sound you hear seems to our ear that exists from its own side. There's a nice sound, bad sound, beautiful music, ugly sound from its own side by itself, objectively. Every smell we smell, there's absolute delicious smell objectively from its own side, or horrible smell objectively from its own side. That's how it appears to our mind, and we kind of believe that appearance, and we perceive that is the reality, that is the truth. Same everything you taste, good taste, bad taste, it doesn't come in our mind that it is, merely label. It just seems like there is a good taste or bad taste, absolutely from its objectively. Whatever we get touched, warm or cold, breeze, or whatever, from whatever elements, or putting in a warm cloth, everything, there's feeling of whatever through that touching, warmness, coldness, whatever feeling, sensations, it feels like that it's coming absolutely from that object, from that blanket, from that air, from that heat, whatever, absolutely from its own side, objectively by itself. Everything that comes in our mind, certain things come in our mind as good, certain things come in our mind as a bad, certain things as a useful, certain things as unuseful. Everything that comes, good or bad, it appear to exist, whatever it exists, appear as existing from its own side objectively in our mind. And not only it appear, at the moment we perceive and believe the appearance. Once through meditations, and you understand all these phenomena do not exist inherently or independently from, or existing from its own side, by its own nature, its own power, how everything is interdependent, how everything is merely left, then you begin, oh, there's the appearance, but I know it's not that way. You don't believe the appearance. Now you don't believe the appearance. At the moment, we believe the appearance. We follow the appearance. And then through that, we get deceived. Then you started to not to, believe the appearance. You know that there is that appearance, but that is not reality. It's like you go to a movie. In the movie, someone kills someone. But it is just a movie. It's not real. You don't believe what you see there. It's really happening there. At the moment, it's like, someone who who has never been to movie theater, who doesn't know anything about movie, and you take to the movie theater and you imagine someone trying to beat someone very badly, how that person will feel. Especially the person being beaten is let's say, his family members. He doesn't know it's a movie. He doesn't know what, how upset, angry, and what he might do. Because he believed that appearance. He didn't know it is a fake. It's a false. And at the moment, that's how we. But once you have that understanding, then it's like that you are going to a movie. Those are false. Whatever you see is not really happening there. It's just a movie. So then you don't get so upset, angry, so attached, whatever you see, so much. And so therefore, then, there is and when you are not in that deep meditation or emptiness, what we call space like emptiness, then, when you are out of that, when you engage in the world, cooking, cleaning, going to your work, whatever you do, everything's that appear good, bad, positive, negative, helpful, not helpful, whatever it appear, you remind yourself everything is like a dream, everything like illusions, This looks so bad, this looks so good, it appears so good, it appears so bad, but this is just an illusion. Like an illusion is like just a dream, So, yes, please.
I guess at the same time, I'm thinking about karma and how, yes, it's all an illusion, but there's karma efficacy, causal efficacy,
effects have consequences. So I guess it's that holding the two at the same time, isn't it? Being aware that, yes, everything's empty, but your actions do have consequences on this conventional level. And so you have to, obviously, observe the laws of karma.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that is where Dhammakirti's points of there, you cannot ignore the both reality, ultimate reality and conventional reality. When you reject one of them, then that problem arises. When you have you just try to focus on conventional reality and you reject or ignore the relative reality or relative, then the problem happens. Then you don't. Then you don't keep your ethics, based on understanding of karma. Therefore, Nagarjuna said, and many other masters, they said, when you have a unmistaken, correct understanding of emptiness, your convictions to the law of cause and effect, karma, will increase, not decrease. When we think we understood the emptiness correctly, but when your convictions in karma, law of cause and effect, decrease or there's no more that means your understanding emptiness is wrong. Something wrong there. Something went wrong. It should be that you increase your conviction in karma more than before, not the other way around. When we go other way around, then that means your understanding of emptiness is falling in the nihilism, one of the extremes, where you reject the conventional world, law of cause and effect. Yeah. So definitely. So I think we didn't have time to do some practice. But I can take some questions now since we have only a few, 6-7 minutes left. Yes, please.
Still stuck on space, so.
Mhm.
So north, south, east, west, take it away or take one away, learn it. I don't understand. It's radio waves and stuff. I'm just, we're just mentioning.
Yeah.
I've never even heard of north, south, east, west space. I've heard of all pervasive space, which pervades everywhere. Therefore, I don't really understand how if you take one away, there's nothing there, because all pervasive space is still there.
Let's say, first of all, the space in the cup.
Yes.
Is there space in the cup?
At the moment, yes.
Yes, at the moment.
Yes.
There's still some tea.
There's no space.
There's still some tea or water. So there is still some space and some water. The space in the cup, okay, depend on the cup. If there's no cup, there's no space of the cup or space in the cup.
Say that again. Sorry.
If there is no cup,
Yeah.
there's no space in the cup.
Yes,
The space in the cup depend on the cup.
yes,
The space in the room depend on the room.
yes.
If there is no room, then there is no space in the room.
Yes.
There's space in this world. Within this world, it depends on this world. And of course, that space could go further than that. Just like the space of this cup, the space of this room, the space of these countries. That is why we have ownership in the space now.
Yes, unfortunately, yes.
These countries own or rule this space. No one can fly over here without their permit. So if you take away all the space that is controlled by Pacific, whatever, Australian continent, North Americans, then where's the space?
I just don't get how you take space away.
No, you cannot take it away. No, it's not like physical where you can take it away,
It's just the
but
label.
it is in a concept. It's just like a calculations or some kind of math you do in your mind. If you take away supposedly the space that is over this continent, you cannot take away physically, but somehow you take away, and then the space in North America take away, the space in Asia take away, and there is no space in this world.
A dog wouldn't see it that way. Because a dog doesn't know the word for space, or that Australia has space above it, does it?
No, it doesn't matter whether the dog sees that or not, you know. I mean, I'm sure dog doesn't receive the partless particle, more small particle, which has south side, north side, east side.
No,
But
I'm just saying, it's because we're human and we're trying to put human
Uh-huh,
turn on it. That's what I mean.
yeah. So here you don't take it physically, but you take mentally. Dismantle mentally. If you dismantle mentally in that way, then where's the space left? There's no space left.
Initially, I just thought you were
Yeah.
taking it away. I'm like, well, you can't. because
Yeah.
you can't take it away and then other space is
No, it is mentally dismantling it, just like you will dismantle this cup,
Yeah.
physically taking each part away
Mm.
and trying to find where the cup is still. If the cup is still there after you take everything part away physically. Space we cannot do physically, but so we have to do mentally dismantle. And if you take this away, this is there a space anymore? You know, if there is, when you take this away, if there's a physical, you take away all of that, will there be space left? And so if there is no space being left after you do that all, that means then it is not inherent existence, independent existence, still it exists on all these different parts that make it.
Human beings.
And space has been always more debated. As you can see, there was more caution on space and also the mind, you know, because the continuity of the mind, unlike like physical, you know. Therefore, within the different school of thought, even within the Buddhism, you know, when they try to find where the self is, some of school of thought will say they will find within the consciousness, because that is that continue from one life to another life. So they think that is, you know, but again, Nagarjuna refuted and rejected that, even that one. And then same with the space. That is why also Nagarjuna at the end, he made that comment. Not only the form is empty or merely labeled, even the space, because that is one of the things that again has been more debated, because it's more, I think, it's more difficult to understand that than some other objects that we give you an example. Yes, I can see 1, 2. Okay, yes, please.
Very quick. Some Buddhist schools of thought state that space is permanent. That's just their approach to it.
Yes. Even though some of them, those who say is permanent, still they will say dependent arising. You know, the space is not changing. The nature is always same. It's not like the flowers. You know, it comes and then get older and then it dissolve and or we born and then get older and we abide and then it come to end. Space does not have that kind of things. So therefore they think, you know, it is not impermanent that nature, but still is dependent arising because of the directions and all of that. Just that it's parts. It depends on its parts.
So it's permanent.
Impermanent. Oh yeah, permanent.
It's
Yeah,
permanent,
some
but it's still
dependent arising. Yeah.
to have space in the room, you need the room,
Yes,
or to have space in the cup, you need the cup.
cup, or even outside of all this, still, as I said, there is a space, this side, this side, this side, that side. And when you take all of that, there's no more space. So from that point of dependent arising, also the other is dependent arising still is merely impurities. The concept is there's certain things, and then we call that a space. And it's labeled, merely labeled. The space is just a merely label. There is a basis for that label, but still the space when you in our is a merely label. So again, it's dependent on that label.
So then, sorry.
Yeah. Yes.
So then it's, hang on, let me just think. So, not all inherently, what is inherently existent is nothing.
Yeah, nothing.
The Buddha's mind,
No,
still not.
do
because
not.
That became, he had to go through the process of becoming the mind. So there's nothing in this.
Yeah.
world
So
inherently existent.
within the existing phenomena, okay, within the existing phenomena, then there's ideas or the science or knowledge in Buddhism, permanent phenomena, non-permanent, impermanent phenomena, okay. There is that ideas or knowledge within the existing phenomena, okay. There's permanent, there are some things which are permanent, and most of things are impermanent. Okay, and within the impermanent, then there is, mostly, physical matters and non-physical matter, the mind. And then there is another one which neither of them, that is the persons. The person is impermanent, but person not body and not the mind. Person, when you talk of person, is not a physical body. Okay, a person's, neither is the mind, but it is still person's impermanent. So therefore they divide into three categories within the impermanent. And then within the form, again, there are many different, and within the mind, different, So then, so even though that, but from Nagarjuna's point of view, all these phenomena, whether it's permanent, non-permanent, all of them are non-inherent existence. All of them are dependent arisings. So, of course, there are some school of thought who believe there is inherent existence. There are some school of thoughts within the Buddhism who believe all phenomena exist inherently. Then there are some school of thought who divide certain phenomena that exist inherently and certain phenomena that do not exist inherently. Then the Nagarjuna's view is that nothing exists inherently. Everything is empty of inherent existence. Everything is empty of independent existence. Everything is dependent arising. Everything is therefore. Okay. So not all the Buddhist school of thoughts have the same view. Different. Yeah, Nagarjuna, Prasangya, Madhyamika. Yeah. All the Tibetan Buddhism follow that lineage, Nagarjuna, and so that is yes, Christina.
Geshe, I was just thinking a little bit more about the space and how it's related to nothing. Like when you said that, like once you take away all of the spaces, then there can't be any space, but then there's still something because there can't be nothing. And then I was just thinking, is it helpful to think about that, like two extremes, that there can never be extremes or absolutes, like it's always, it's always going to be something there and it's dependent on something else.
Well, when you take everything there, then there will not be so-called a space anymore there.
But it'll be something else.
Yeah. If I take all this part of cup, it's no more cup, but it's still there is I don't know whether we might say it's part of a cup or not part of a cup, whatever that matter, but it's something, but it's not a cup. Yes, please.
But even, for example, if you have a cup full of water, you pour out the water, it doesn't mean that then there's nothing in the cup.
Yes.
There's still oxygen, nitrogen, and CO2.
Yes, yes.
All of this. So
Yes, yes.
Space is. So you could argue like that. There's never no space.
Sneaky.
It depends on the definition of the space. I think maybe different school of thoughts, might have different definition of space. And one of the, whenever there is an argument, we have to fix the definitions that everyone agree. Otherwise, you have different definition of space and I have different, and then we're debating, then that doesn't lead to any conclusions. So there need to be a common kind of definitions or understanding of what space is. So I think it depends on that, because in Buddhism, there is a common kind of understanding or definition of what space is. So then within that context, then they have this different argument or different common kind of definition. Otherwise, yeah. Yeah.
What is the definition of space?
Definition of space is nothingness. In Tibetan, talk rekasm gi mega. Talk rekasm mega. Talk means something that can abstract. Okay. Something that is abstract. So this can abstract another object. This can abstract another object from, because it's cup, then I cannot put other object here. It's abstracting some other. And reg is something you can touch, physically touch, contact, Talk is absent of that. Absent of that, something touchable, something that abstract another objects, another physical objects from being there, And Toreka, mega, and absent of that, which is in terms, there is an idea of Gakpa. Absence or negations, and there are two kinds of that negation. One is purely just negating, and then others is while you negate something, indirectly you establish something. When I say John is not in this room, I'm negating John is not here, so there's no John here. Indirectly, I'm saying he must be somewhere else. There's one of that, and one of them is that you negate, but you don't imply that there's something else. So we call mega. That's how our mind functions, and that is how it. And so this, the definition of the space is that kind of negations, that is absence of something that is tangible and something that is abstracting.
Can I just point out that, as everyone knows, this topic of emptiness is huge, and like the Geshe, etc., study 4 different types of mind, its mental factors and emptiness before they get to this point. And if you go to YouTube, there's fantastic amount of lectures by Geshe Sherab on wisdom of emptiness. If you're interested from this, right, just go to YouTube, and also it's on the FPMTA site. Just log in Geshe Sherab emptiness, and he's luckily enough, because because Geshe is a bit of an expert on this, and he teaches so widely, a lot of the other FPG centers in Europe and the US have recorded some of Geshe's teachings based on texts, which always make it perhaps a little bit easier if you have a text, you know. So I'm just saying that as someone from National Office, that if you're interested in this topic, because trying to compress something into like 2 minutes or a day, it's just impossible, you know, without it. But it's amazing for me personally what Geshe has been able to, I don't know, help me with today and teach on. So I just thought it would be interesting.
I'm not expert, but definitely there are some that I've
Very good.
taught on that subject for more days, you know, so that I could go a little bit more details, some of them.
Maybe next year, Geshe, we could have you for longer on this topic. Please. Have a retreat on it. Anyway.
Yes, please.
This might be I'm thinking, okay, so say there's someone today walking around Katoomba who's realised emptiness. I'm just trying to imagine what it would be like. Because I find that helpful, because it's motivating for me. Like, so because it's, you know, it's such an effort or, you know, seeing everything's, it's a dream and it seems to be that it's not, and it's a lot of effort all the time. But so if there was somebody walking around Katoomba who realised emptiness,
it will be all like this. "24 hour."
because they wouldn't be grasping,
Yeah.
they wouldn't be grasping and being, but they'd still see suffering, wouldn't they? Would
Yeah,
still see
yeah.
They'd still have compassion.
Yes.
And would they be more focused on, they'd be able to be more focused on acting to do what they, you know, to help, you know, act in the world. Yeah.
One of the things for sure is that you will have less delusions or less stronger delusions, and you will not, the person will not be so easily affected by others' conditions, you know. Yes, it doesn't go like this. Still, you need to work on that for a long time. Just by having the realization, the emptiness, the delusion doesn't disappear like that, you know. Just like when you have loving kindness, compassion, it doesn't mean, you know, all other, you know, anger and everything that disappear like that, you know. Still, we need. You have started cutting it, but it might take long to fully cut it. You have started to bring the soul, and now you are starting cutting, you know. But that might take time before you can fully cut it. So yeah, and that is why we had the 5 paths. And then in the first path, the path of accumulation, you already have realization emptiness. Still, you need to go through all this path. 5, the path of preparation, the path of seeing, path of meditations, and then you have the result, the path of no more learning.
When they get to the path of seeing, is that then where it's a complete?
Path of seeing, then they have the direct realization emptiness. At the very beginning, they have experiential understanding, not just a theoretical, experiential realization understanding, but still with a concept, still with a using inference, reasoning, logic, you know. So it is still with thoughts, concept, you know. This is not inherently existing because this and that, you know, inference. But then after some, you go beyond that inference or beyond that concept, and then you have direct realization. And that is when part of seeing means seeing directly, you know, seeing directly. And still after part of seeing, still you have way to go. Then from there, then you don't create, as I mentioned before, then you don't create any throwing karma anymore. You don't create any more throwing karma, and then
Is
yeah.
that when you become arhat?
You become Arya, not Arhat.
Oh,
And when you achieve the path of normal learning, then that is when you become Arhat, the fifth one, the final, the result. But when you achieve the path of seeing, then you become Arya, not Arhat. Arya and Arhat, different, yeah.
And then when you're an arhat, then you've got to go through the 10 Buddhas.
Then when you are Arhat, you can bliss out in that for eons and eons. Or you can decide to go through the Bodhisattva path and then boomies and achieve fully enlightenment. Or if you want to just bliss out, you can bliss out there for eons and eons. Yes, please.
Geshe, if I can just ask you that, the power of prayer.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of things that happen in this world, and I get angry. And so one of the things I think, okay, I can sit down, I can calm and relax, and I can say now, prayer. No, it's not tangible to anybody else, just me.
Mm-hmm.
So does that prayer just go out into space and get lost in space? Or is that prayer just to benefit me because I'm thinking I'm doing some good? Or
Yes.
does that prayer benefit people in Tibet, people in Ukraine, people who are suffering? What is the power of prayer?
I do believe the prayer of the power of the prayer. Of course, it helps you, benefit you. Instead of feeling helpless, you feel you can do something. Okay. And also, when you pray, we do because we are concerned about them. So it helps you to reconnect with your love, compassions. Because you wouldn't pray for someone if you have no concern for that person. And so every time when you're trying to pray for someone, because we care about them, because we have concern about them, and each time we do that, then we are reconnecting with our own goodness, our own love, compassion. It's kind of, giving water to your love and compassion seed to grow. So in that sense, we are working with our own practice, our own mind. But not only that, I do believe that the prayer can affect the others. And the more karmic connection we have with the other person we are praying, the more stronger effect it could have, because of karmic connections. And of course, since we don't know with whom we have stronger karmic connection. Of course, in this life, we know we have certain people who are karmically strong connected, But in the past, we don't know who. We might have even more stronger karmic connection to someone else. We don't know this time than the people we know. So we don't know. But the stronger karmic connection we have, the stronger we are able to affect them with our prayers and our practice, dedicating and that. And so definitely I believe, not only I believe, of course it's taught in the teachings and that it affects, that is why there is a prayer, that is why we try to pray. But I do believe that as well, there is some effect. It doesn't get just lost in the space, it does. Of course, there seems to be a different outcome of different research that I've seen, it seems like, I don't remember, quite a while ago, there seems to be one research where they had patients, kind of divide into two groups, same patients, some kind of illness, and giving same treatments. And one group, they have asked other people to pray for them and they do not know they are being prayed, so without them knowing, they have been asked to do some prayer for different groups for that. And then one group, they didn't ask any prayers, and they did the same treatment, and the people who have been prayed seem to respond better, according to that one of the research. In one other research, they didn't find much difference, but definitely some research found the differences. So it didn't, all research didn't lead to same conclusion so far, and constantly there seems to be a slightly different research, and I don't know what might have played things that they have different outcome of that research. I can't say for sure. Another things that you see that might help is there is a book by a Japanese, his name is Dr. Imoto, and he took a photo of a water crystal. There's a book and a lot of writing. And if you believe what his findings are, there's power of the prayers with all the experiment he did. Sometimes he had a glass of water and he labeled different words, love or ugly or cursing words, and then he take pictures of that water crystal. He froze that water and then take pictures, and then image that come from that. It's very interesting, when it is something positive words, the crystal are so beautiful, and when it is kind of, cursing and bad word, sometimes there's no shape, black shape, very, So he experimented with the word, putting like that, prayers, thoughts, there's, if I remember correctly, there is one river, I don't know where it is, very polluted, very polluted river. And then the picture he took of that river before, and then he invited some monks to do prayers. And after prayer, the image of that, the differences, And so he have experimented and did that with the different positive thought, negative thoughts, word, prayers, and then just label. It's very interesting. And if that, what he's finding is accurate and kind, then definitely there is the power of your thoughts, power of your prayers. If it affects the water crystal, then definitely it affects the person, who has the water in their body, which is made of a lot of, most time of the water cells, so it's definitely going to affect, so that is very from scientific point of view, that will be one of research that might have done in that area. And so anyway, so also that can help support to understand a little bit the power of our thought, the power of our prayers, the power of our words. And also that helped me before, and I used to have a little bit kind of, generally I'm quite skeptical person, and I think sometimes my monks friends thinks I'm too skeptical, but that's how my mind works, I wouldn't say scientific, but my mind doesn't believe because my teacher said, or because it was said in teachings. I have to see whether it's scientific or I have to, through reasoning, logics, or through some explanation, I have to be convinced to believe in something. I can't just believe if my teacher said, or just because it was said in teaching. That is not how my mind works, even though it works for some people, you know. And of course, also in teaching, you see, you know, putting certain mantra on your body is purify and heal and help, you know, by seeing, by touching, of course, reciting this, you know. But after he's seen that his experiment with putting that word, you know, such as prayers, a nice word like love, compassion, and putting cursing word and the reaction of the waters. With that, I begin to have little bit kind of more opening of my mind and little bit possibility that by putting mantras, because it is a positive, something helpful, positive, that it can be healed, that it can, by touching it, by just, it can be healed, that it can be benefit, purify, all of that. So for me, that evidence, that research did help me a little bit to understand little aspect of that part. You know, I might not be still, you know, 100% that absolutely that is the case, but my mind is much more open and I see possibility of that. So there's less kind of resistant to that ideas, you know. Yes, please.
There was a lady and she had a car crash. She's very badly injured. So she left her body and she saw all the people lined up. And so she sort of started to go along. She was up and she could hear people complaining. But then further on, she saw a big blue light and it was like going right up to the sky. And the person was praying. So yeah, she said, "Oh, prayer is effective."
Okay, we'll do the dedications.
Yeah.
Oh, you want to do the mandala? Okay.
All right, so we'll go to page 9 and we'll do a short mandala offering. Oh, slowly. I think I was like, the bomb carrier. How are we going to do this?
So, yeah. Lama Sangye Gyone Doa Chikya Ma Kewanya pa me pa yang, kong le kong tu kewan sho.
Over the page.
Tawa rinpoche, ma ke pa nang ke ju se, kewanya pa me pa yang, kong le kong tu kewan sho.
Special dedication prayer on the other side. Due to all the merits of the three
Times collected by me and by numberless Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and by all sentient beings. May all the obstacles for the health and long life of His Holiness Dalai Lama, Kyabche Lama Saba Rinpoche, all the lineage lamas be instantly removed and all their holy wishes be immediately fulfilled. May all our precious kind teachers have long and healthy lives, and may they continue to turn the wheel of Dharma for the sake of suffering beings, for as long as space remains and for as long as sentient beings remain. May Kunshan Yishi and all FMD centers and projects, including media projects, be free of obstacles, have all the support they need to preserve the mind and tradition, and spread the teaching of Shakyamuni and Lama Tsongkhapa, exactly in accordance with the wishes of Lama Yishi, Kyabche Lama Soba Rinpoche. May the Kunshan Yishi Center continue to provide support to the community for those practicing Dharma and place to rejoice in. May all the throughout the FMG be guided by perfectly qualified mind and religious in all their lives. May their lives be enlightened as soon as possible, for sake of all suffering mothers and siblings. May all sentient beings have happiness in the causes, be free from suffering in these causes. May each and everyone, without exception, quickly attain the enlightened state. Come dear, ma le ba, kang le chong we, sam be yi shi no, ka tin sung me, tin zin ja so la, so wa de so.
Wish granting, wish of filling jewel, source of every single benefit and happiness in this world. To be incomparably kind, Tenzin Gyatso, I beseech, may all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled.
Shin Jam Gwen Jave, Tenzin Jong Bewe, Kun So To Pose, Cho Song Ko Le Mo Tu Tu, Pa Ta So Du Che Kun Du Shan.
You who uphold the securest moral way,
Bountiful, sustaining, preserving, spreading, and do not be going exhausting. Who masterfully accomplish magnificent praying, one of the three truths, saving of myself and other your disciples, please live in long. It's okay. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you for coming. Your patience. Okay, thank you.
So Geshe, on behalf of Kunshan Yeshi Executive, the members, the students, the benefactors, everybody in this room, thank you so much for coming back to Kunshan Yeshi again and for giving us these amazing 4 days of teachings. From the bottom of my heart and everybody in this room, we please request you to come back again very quickly. And as Steph said earlier, I think maybe we can do a retreat on emptiness.
Can I come tomorrow?
You can come tomorrow. You're more than happy. Don't leave. Okay? Everyone else can just come back. Everyone around Australia can come to Kunshan Yeshi and we'll continue teachings here. But no, in all seriousness,
yes.
Please come back again very soon. I know that I'm speaking on behalf of everybody. We have benefited so much. It's been a very long time since we've been able to host precious teachers due to COVID, and I feel like you have literally cleared the karma and you've given us so much inspiration, and I'm just going to get emotional. I'm just so happy that you've been here. It's been an absolute pleasure. And I also just want to thank all the volunteers, Laurel and Robert for looking after the shop, the twins for always doing everything you do in the Gompa, Jenny and Ray for helping whenever we just kind of threw things at you, which was happening a lot. Arlene at the very back, who has been my rock throughout all of this. Harry, who's not here today. Brian and Dawn, of course, because they also just jump in and do anything whenever they can. And all the volunteers that helped out. And you probably also got jobs. I'm sorry, I just throw jobs at everybody that walks past me. So thank you to everybody. I also just want to say, if you've created a connection with us, we're more than happy to have volunteers help us. We're a very, very small team, and it takes a lot to keep this going. Kungsang Geshe is not inherently existent. It relies on causes and conditions, and lots of causes and conditions.
I thought it was inherently existent.
Leading on from the teachings, it takes an army to pull this centre off. So even if you've got an hour a month or a week or whatever you've got, connect with us and help us out to keep this beautiful centre going. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.